Stacy, welcome to the podcast. Joining us today is Stacy Pellettieri, a licensed clinical social worker, founder, and recognized expert in trauma and child mental health. Stacy leads 5 ventures in the mental health space and brings deep expertise as an educator and podcast host. Her work focuses on improving access, awareness, and care for individuals and families navigating emotional, psychological challenges. First and foremost, how did you get started down this path?
Good question. I'm one of those lucky people that just sort of always knew what I wanted to do. When I was a kid, all the other kids wanted to like play restaurant or house, and I wanted to play therapist. I used to take out a pad and pen, and I would sit down with my friends, and I'd be like, "Tell me all your problems." I really just always wanted to help people. I think a lot of it probably stems from my childhood trauma, which is
Mm,
not unusual. I remember being in social work school and sitting in a horseshoe with all of the other students, and the professor would say, "So, what brings you here? What made you all want to be social workers?" And we all had a story. So, here
yeah.
I am.
We're going to put a bit backwards here because
Yeah.
you talk about you specialize in sibling loss, and I find that very interesting because it's not a very common area of focus. Is there a reason why you chose that specific path?
Yep, that is my childhood trauma.
Hmm.
And so losing a sibling at a very young age, kind of brings me into this realm of so many different things. It's very nuanced because first and foremost, it's early childhood trauma, which is not something that everyone is comfortable delving into, and it is something that is so wildly common and needing some more attention. And at the same time, sibling loss is not something that is something a lot of the experts in the field talk about. And even there, we see so much more need and understanding what goes on for children when they lose a sibling, because there's so much focus on the parents, because it is such a deep, painful loss when people lose their children. And so these siblings do tend to get lost in the mix there a little bit. And so also what we're looking at is family roles, attachment issues, all of the different things that come from these experiences that, again, don't really get the attention and the
Mm,
understanding and research that they deserve. So it's been a journey for me because it's something that I've wanted to really garner expertise in and do something about for most of my life. But because of my trauma, it's been a little bit difficult for me to even allow myself, to kind of process the pain and to step into really where I want to focus. And so I finally allowed myself to start working on the book I've been wanting to write my whole life, and to really kind of step into this space and help where there really is not enough focus right now.
yeah, it's a beautiful answer. Do you feel there's like a sort of symbiotic relationship between you helping other people who've had similar troubles and kind of makes you feel a deeper inner sense of happiness and calm, or helps you deal with your own stuff introspectively?
Yeah. So, that's my role, right? So losing a sibling at 3, I became a caretaker to my parents,
Mm,
unknowingly, right? My role became, the regulator of their emotions. I held space for them, and I became responsible for how they felt. Don't talk about this, or don't bring that up, or don't ask questions about this or that because it will make your mom cry.
right.
And my mom, loved the heck out of me and would do anything in the world for me when I was growing up. But she could not handle the idea that losing my sister might have actually screwed me up a little bit. And
Yeah.
so I really focused in on what I could do for her and what I could do to help her. And I became the helper. And so for me, it's also, helps me because it helps me to kind of really be in my role by helping others. And I'm finally now at 51 years old at a place where I'm allowing myself to say, finally, you know, what do I need here? Is it okay for me to finally allow myself to ask what is going to be helpful for me? And what I've learned is that I've spent most of my life not really owning the story because it was my parents' story, not mine. And I've finally now allowed myself to own the story. And there's so much
Mm,
healing in owning the story. That is where the trauma work is. Anyone who's experienced any kind of trauma, will learn from their own treatment. The healing journey is about telling the story. It's about owning the story. It's about processing the story. And if you're not allowed to tell the story or own the story, you can't process the story. And so
Right.
for me now, by helping others with these issues, I am finally claiming the story. And so I'm finally working through my own healing journey, which has really been an amazing opportunity for me. Finally.
Yeah, whether it's losing someone you care about at a young age or having problems growing up in your house, it could really play a profound role in how you behave in your later days. And
Yes.
um, I wonder, just a quick question here: do you see a different set of mechanics when someone loses a sibling compared to when someone loses a parent at a young age, or would you say that the dynamic is very similar?
There are things that are similar for sure. If you're looking at stage of development, how old is the child? Where are they at cognitively and developmentally and emotionally? Can they understand what death is? Do they know how to grieve? Are they developmentally able to grieve? Are they able to sit with and tolerate their feelings? Are they able to understand what's happening and, put language to and narrate their story in a way that helps them move it through and process it through their body? Or does it get stuck in the neural pathways because they're too young to understand?
Right.
So, how old a child is going to play a role in how they process loss, regardless of what kind of loss it is. The difference, though, I think, between losing a parent or losing a sibling is this. This is the most profound difference. When you lose a parent, everyone around you recognizes the devastation of being a young child losing a parent. Oh my gosh, you've lost your mom or you've lost your dad, or, God forbid, you've lost both your mom and your dad. How horrible for you. What do you need? How can I help you? Talk about it, process it, share. How can I be there for you? And when a child loses a sibling, not always, but they often don't get that support or that focus because everyone's focusing on the parents that have lost the child. And now the child who's lost their sibling starts to feel like, well, mom's really sad or dad's really sad or everyone's
Right.
there for them. It's losing a sibling isn't as bad as losing a child, or it's not as bad as losing a parent. And so there isn't as much space for really being able to share and talk about feelings in a way that's safe. They start to feel responsible for their parents. They start to feel responsible for everybody around them that's sad. And they don't really feel like this is something that they get to be sad about or they get to talk about. And so that's where the difference is there's so much more allowance for grieving when you're losing a parent than when you're losing a sibling. When you're losing a parent, you get to feel and be responsible for your own feelings. When you lose a sibling, you often feel responsible for your parents instead, and you need to make up for your parents' loss.
Yeah. I really appreciate this conversation, and
Hmm.
it probably just by talking to you for a few minutes, it makes it very clear to me how much of an effect losing a sibling played on your life, because you've carved your whole career around it.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that you're this open to kind of to have that introspection, it tells me that, and even like how you describe it, like the most important part about getting over it or moving on is talking about it.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about your podcast for just a moment. So you just started a podcast,
Yeah.
and why do people do that? So does that tie into, and what's the mission behind the podcast? And does that tie into the bigger picture here?
Yeah. You know, 100%. So I've been in the field for 28 years. I've been a therapist working with people across the gamut of ages, five through the elderly. I work with everybody, and I've done a little bit of everything through the years, anxiety, depression, OCD, trauma, you name it, all of it. And I'm trained in so many different modalities. And so what I've learned in my 28 years is, why do people do that? And on so many different realms. And what I've discovered through my career is that having a sense of self-awareness, understanding why you do the things you do, understanding why other people do the things that they do, having that understanding and having that knowledge is power. And it gives us what we like to call resiliency. I believe that I am a more resilient person and that people who have
Hmm.
worked with me are more resilient because they have a deeper understanding, where they have a clear picture of who they are. They have a clearer picture of the people around them, which means they're less affected by others. They're
Right.
less likely to internalize. They're less likely to take things personally. They're less likely to project. They see others with clarity. They see themselves with clarity. So they have healthier relationships. They're less reactive. They have a more healthy relationship with emotion. They're able to sit with and tolerate distress without the need to be reactive or to avoid or to distract away from what is hard. And so, what I seek to endeavor by doing my podcast is talking about all different topics across the gamut of different things to really just be able to give people, to give society this gift of resilience. Understand yourself, understand others, understand why we do what we do, from complicated grief to why women need to wear sexy outfits on Halloween, right? We talk about everything. And so, understanding people in society and understanding yourself, I think, is really just the link to freedom and happiness, in my
Yeah.
opinion. And so that's the whole purpose of why do people do that.
Oh, well, a lot to discuss there. So, understanding why other people do things sometimes can be extremely profound to
Mhm.
just get more empathy or sympathy for that individual. However, it's correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not always the healthiest process because sometimes people don't necessarily apply logic to their emotions. They don't necessarily apply logic to their behavior. And you can be trapped in an endless downhill spiral of why did they do that? Why would they do that? Oh, was there, you tend to replay certain past behaviors over and over and over again, and there's no real purpose for it. So, and a part of knowing when to stop, I think, is like you mentioned very well, it's just understanding yourself. Because when
Yes.
you understand yourself, you tend to question people's behaviors less because
Yes.
their motivation for their behavior has less of an implication on your own self identity. When you know yourself, and that doesn't mean blind ego, like knowing your strengths and knowing your weaknesses is extremely important to navigating this world because other opinions about you, other people's opinions about you are important. They're information. They're stuff where they're a lens which you can see, perspective through,
Mhm.
but they don't necessarily reshape how you see yourself. So it seems like that's part of why it's probably a podcast is because that's a complicated landscape to traverse. I mean, it's really important to understand why people do certain things, and sometimes it's really important not to question why they do certain things as well. And what advice would you give to someone kind of navigating that dichotomy?
Yeah, if someone is getting caught in what seems like potentially like an OCD spiral of needing to know, right? I think that's when we're going too far, right? It's about being able to see with clarity, right? The break between, your need to know and just understanding, right? There's just the understanding of, you know what? That person is doing what they're doing because it's about them, right? This is their issue. It's not about me, right? What I try to teach people is that how people show up and what people do is about what is going on inside of them. It's not about you. When we get caught in, I need to know why they did that. I need to know why they did that. What you're
I love that
really
you're saying that.
asking
It's so
is this about
egocentric.
me? Is it
It's
my
so
fault?
egocentric to think that people's
Yes.
behavior is tells says anything about yourself.
It's
Like,
never
well,
about you.
most people in this world have so many of their own problems that you're too consumed to care
Mhm.
about other people. Like, you have to realize that you're not the only one with problems. Everyone's got problems, and people's bad behavior or what you seem as malicious or
Mhm.
ill-intended it says so little about you, and it says so much about who they are as a person, not necessarily in a bad way.
Yeah, it
It
says
just
nothing
this
about you. Nothing.
that that can take years of wisdom to really internalize and act on
It's about
because
acceptance, I mean, one of the
yeah,
things we work on, there's a modality called acceptance and commitment therapy, and it's also part of DBT, which is about really sitting with and accepting what is. It's radical acceptance. It's saying, I don't have control over how that person behaves, but I'm not going to put the onus on them to be responsible for how I feel.
yeah,
I'm going to accept that this is just what they do. This is how they behave, and I don't have to internalize that and make that about me. I'm not going to project what I need onto them and say, I need to understand why they're doing that. And because I need to prove to myself that this isn't about me. I have to accept that person
Yeah,
is who they are and I don't have any control over that. And, how someone shows up is 100% about what's going on inside of them and never about you. And so
right,
your need to understand them and, your need to control them is about you. So when you find yourself in that spiral of, why did they do that? Why did they do that? I need to know. I need to know. What you need to ask yourself is, why do I need to know? What does it
correct.
mean for me to need
And
to know?
and the only question you should ask is, how should I respond?
Hmm.
Because speaking of Marcus Aurelius, the father of Stoicism, I mean, this is very much in line philosophically with that.
Hmm.
Having a Stoic mentality of life is not to question other people's behaviors, not to try to change other people. It's just how to respond. It can focus your energy on the things you can control, and
Yes.
free yourself from the things you can't. And when someone does something that's poorly intentioned towards you or ill-willed, um, you can you can forever try to figure out why they did it, or you can just say, what's the best response that I can do? Because that really is the best way for me to live my life. Because
Yeah,
you
it's
can't control what other
important
people do.
to
Yeah.
understand what's coming up for you, right? Like when I work with a client, I might say, what does it mean for you that this is what happened with this person? What's showing up for you? Right? It seems like you're really looking to solve this, or you're really looking for them to understand that what they did is wrong, or you're really looking, for some sort of resolve. And, what is that about for you? What's showing up for you? Because all you can control is how you allow others to affect you. You can't control others. And so understanding your triggers and understanding what is, coming up for you, what you're feeling and how you're responding to it and how you're wanting to respond to it is really what you want to be curious about, right? We always want to be curious, right? This is so interesting that I'm so affected by this. What is this about for me? What does this mean for me? What meaning am I assigning to it that this person, was late for the date, or that this person forgot that we had plans, or that, this person cooked this thing for dinner that they know I don't like. Why would they do that? It's what does it mean for you, right? What meaning are you assigning to it? And understanding that the meaning you're assigning to it is about you and not about them.
Yeah. Given the change in your own personal journey, Stacey, do you see yourself changing your practice and the types of people you choose to focus your energy on helping? If you were to go into the future 5, 10 years from now, um, where do you see yourself?
Oh, good question. I'm sort of at this weird place right now where I have a very large group practice. We have 5 locations across Long Island. I have close to
Mm,
90 therapists that work with me
wow,
here.
that's incredible.
And
You should put that in
I'm
your bio, by
so,
the way.
so blessed and so grateful to be in this place where um, I'm able to supervise and train so many people. We can, the more people that work for me, the more people I help. And so I love that because I don't have to be the one to help everybody. I love training people to kind of go out there and be the little army that can go out there and really provide all of this mental relief because people are really suffering so much. So what I've done recently is I've started a whole new arm of my business, which is really more macro than micro work, where we're going into school districts and we're doing a lot of school-based mental health work that is really doing a lot of training to staff, training to teachers, training to social workers, training to psychologists on how to really put a lot more social and emotional work into curriculum to help people with this awareness that they need as they're growing and developing so that they can feel a little bit healthier. We're seeing, a huge need for this right now with technology and social media creating, such a crisis around depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation. The uptick in suicidal ideation amongst youth since 2008, the rise of social media is really alarming.
Right.
And so really kind of getting in there. Um, this is really something that's just started, and I'm so excited about it. And so I feel like over the course of the next 5, 10 years, my work is probably going to really kind of dip more into that macro work of really spreading across the community of the country or potentially the world instead of just my little community of Long Island, to be able to help as many people as I can with the things that I've been so blessed to learn over the last 30 years.
Hmm. Quick question about AI. So I don't know how
Mm,
involved you are with all that, but
mm,
it's like AI just intrinsically has this sort of distant, emotionless connotation to it. But at the same time, it's kind of excelled in domains that we didn't expect to, like just the music, arts, stuff that makes humans feel like, hey, we're uniquely human. We're seeing AI almost, that's like the first area in which they're just excelling at an unbelievable pace. And how do you see that? How do you see AI fitting into your industry in the sense where, it can allow you to do your job so much better to the point where it can almost be considered malpractice not to use AI to kind of get your preliminary landscape of like an approach on something and whatnot, or research or data. And, even having like a personal assistant, because here's the thing, a lot of us who are dealing with problems, the first person we ask is ChatGPT to give us perspective. And it
mhm.
does a really good job sometimes. And I wanted to know your perspective on that specific point, and also in a broader sense, how you feel AI is going to influence your domain of expertise.
Yeah. So I think it's really important to know the difference between technology and human beings and what we need technology for and what we can use technology for and what we really need to make sure we're continuing to lean into human connection for. So if you want to use AI or ChatGPT for research and knowledge and understanding, just the way years ago we would take out a self-help book and read about anxiety and learn a little bit more, educate yourself. Educating yourself is a brilliant, wonderful thing to do. People should keep doing that and professionals should keep doing that as much as possible. And if we can learn more and take more trainings and be better therapists because we're learning through AI, then that's wonderful. However, can AI replace therapy? Should a person rely on or lean into Chat GPT instead of going to a therapist? Absolutely not, because what a therapist can do, which AI cannot do, is the actual human connection that is necessary part of the healing.
Mhm,
In good therapy, there is what's called the transference. The actual relationship is the healing, having the corrective experience of allowing another human being in their energy to hold space and react and respond and to give you the opportunity to be heard by another human being in a way that you were never heard, or validated by another human being in a way that you were never validated, by having the ability to reenact things that really need reenacting. We're forming healthier attachments or we're repairing attachment, and that is not something you could possibly do with a bot or, just through typing things in and asking questions. So there's a difference between psychoeducation and therapy. And if you want to use both collaboratively to be part of your healing journey, or if we want to use it as clinicians to learn, great. But you cannot, replace that human element. And moving away from therapy for a moment and just talking about, human beings and development, we're learning that human beings are actually lagging in development because of technology, right? Just children, young children, babies, toddlers who are sitting with their iPad in front of them and watching videos instead of interacting with their parents and not seeing actual physical faces talking to learn language or pausing when they coo is actually causing delays in language development. It's causing the white matter in the brain to not grow, um,
mhm,
developmentally the way it's supposed to. And we're seeing children now showing up in preschool and kindergarten with severe executive function delays and language delays, which is alarming. And so
mhm,
we have to, as human beings, know the difference between what we actually need to continue growing and developing as humans. And we need to remember how important movement and human connection is in our growth throughout being an older person, right? Through the elderly. Like we always need human interaction and that human component. And so we have to be careful as people how much we lean into AI for anything and everything, especially therapy.
Hmm. Good answer.
Yeah.
Stacy, how can people get in touch with you?
Sure. So, I could be reached so many different ways. You can definitely find me on my podcast. Why do people do that? I do have a website, why do people do that part.com, which you can contact me on, and you can see all the different places where you can find my podcast. You can find me on my website for my therapy practice, Long Island Counseling Services.com. You can email me at Stacy at licrpc.com. That's Stacy spelled Stacy. Um, and of course, I've got my school-based program, which is districtsupportservices.com. So there's lots of different ways to find me and learn more about my businesses.
Stacy, I appreciate your time and wisdom, and I absolutely love what you're doing.